All right, let's open up a historical cold case, one that was buried, literally, for over 2,000 years. It's the story of a version of Judaism you've never heard of, one that thrived on a little island in the Nile. And let me tell you, it challenges pretty much everything we thought we knew about where the Bible came from.
So, just for a second, what if I told you that the Bible you know wasn't the only version? That those foundational stories, the Exodus from Egypt, the laws of Moses, the worship of one single God, were just one path, and that other Jewish communities existed with their own temples, their own rules, and even their own gods?
Well, turns out we don't have to imagine it. Way back in the 5th century BCE, a whole community of Jewish soldiers and their families were living on an island in Egypt called Elephantine. They were this lively, bustling outpost of Israelite culture, but they were a long, long way from their homeland in Judea.
And for thousands of years, their story was just gone, a complete secret buried under the sand. But then, right around the turn of the 20th century, archaeologists hit the jackpot. They unearthed this treasure trove of hundreds of documents written on papyrus. And these letters, these contracts, they're the only clues we have to their incredible, mysterious world.
So, the first thing we have to look at is, what did these people consider their holy scripture? What did their Bible look like? And this, right here, is where our investigation gets really interesting. Because the answer is a total shocker.
That's right. I'm not kidding. In all the hundreds of documents they found at Elephantine, there wasn't a single scrap of the Torah. No Genesis, no Exodus, none of the first 5 books that are the absolute bedrock of Judaism as we know it. It's just not there.
And I mean, just look at this comparison. The difference is night and day. On the left, you have what we think of as the biblical canon, the Torah, the prophets, the whole deal. But the library we actually found at Elephantine, on the right, it's completely different. Instead of reading about Moses, they were reading about a wise man named Ahikar.
So who's this Ahikar guy? Well, his story was basically a blockbuster fable, super popular all across the ancient Near East. The fact that they had copies of this, but not the Torah, tells you that their whole culture, their whole moral universe, was shaped by totally different stories.
And this isn't just about their reading list. Take their holidays. They definitely celebrated a version of Passover, but their main guide for it, this Passover letter, it only talks about the ritual details. The entire foundational story, the escape from slavery in Egypt, the very reason for the holiday, is completely missing.
Okay, so the missing Torah is really just the tip of the iceberg. The papyri basically give us a case file on this community, and it reveals at least 4 shocking ways their religion was nothing like what the Hebrew Bible demands. We're going to walk through the evidence piece by piece. We'll look at their temple, the gods they worshipped, the laws they lived by, and the holidays they celebrated. And each clue paints a picture of a faith that you might not even recognize. All right, first piece of evidence in the file. The Jews of Elephantine built their very own magnificent temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Now, today, that might not sound wild, but this was a massive violation of the law in Deuteronomy. That law was crystal clear. You can only offer sacrifices in one place, the temple in Jerusalem, period. But here they were, hundreds of miles away, with their own priests and their own altar, doing their own thing. So, a rogue temple is one thing. But believe it or not, the second piece of evidence from this case file is even more radical. Okay, quick refresher. The absolute core belief of Judaism is monotheism, right? The belief in one and only one God. It's the central prayer. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It is the foundational idea. And yet, when you look at the legal papers from Elephantine, you see something else. When they had to swear an oath in court, they didn't just swear by Yahweh alone. They invoked other divine names right there beside him. Get this, they worshipped a goddess. The texts talk about Anat Yahu, who they seem to have seen as Yahweh's divine partner, his consort. This wasn't monotheism, this was something else entirely. It's a theological bombshell.
Third, and this is important, these beliefs weren't just abstract ideas, they shaped their everyday lives.
When it came to the biggest events in life,
Marriage, divorce, property disputes. The Elephantine Jews didn't look to the laws of Moses for answers. Nope. Their contracts are all based on local Aramaic and Egyptian legal traditions. For them, the Torah simply wasn't the final word on the law.
And that brings us to the fourth and final piece of evidence in our case file.
Yeah, just like we saw with that Passover letter, their whole vibe around religious holidays was different. It seems like for them, religion was all about performing the correct rituals at the correct time. It wasn't about connecting to a shared history, like remembering the Exodus. The whole why behind the holiday was different, even if the what looked kind of similar.
So let's recap. We've got a community with no Torah, a temple they shouldn't have had, multiple gods, and different laws. What on earth is going on? Were they just bad Jews? No way! The answer is so much more interesting than that.
See, they weren't an exception to the rule. They were a time capsule. They give us this incredible living snapshot of Israelite religion from a time before the Hebrew Bible as we know it was all nailed down, before one version of the faith became the standard. They were on a legitimate alternative path that, just by a twist of fate, didn't survive.
And that is exactly why this little community on an island in Egypt matters so much. Their story just shatters the idea of a single, unchanging religion from the very beginning. It shows there was this surprising diversity. It shows that the very idea of a fixed, sacred Bible took centuries to develop. And maybe most importantly, it's this powerful reminder that the history we learn is simply the story told by the survivors.
The discovery of the Elephantine papyri was a total fluke, and it completely rewrote a chapter of religious history. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other forgotten stories, whatever lost Bibles are still out there, buried under the sand, just waiting to be found?